I'll stand behind here because it hides my stomach. First of all, sorry I couldn't be here this morning. I was sorting out the passport to come to Devon and it took a while. But anyway, we do. What I want to talk about is growth and opportunity. This is we're doing a review at the moment about what, oh my God, it's going to do this thing on me again. Anybody can stop the automatic slide handler. Anyway, it's about what the next 10, 20 years might look like, 10 years in particular. I just put a seed in your head about 3 words that are very important when people look at the future. It came from an economist. An economist only ever gives you a forecast, but there's actually 2 other words: prediction, forecast, and scenarios. And I think you can predict the next 2 or 3 years, often. You can forecast after that. After that, you're into scenarios. So if anybody tells you what the next 20 years are going to be like, there's scenarios, which conditions your head to what you might have to face. But like this morning, I was delighted that the number of 80-year-olds in the next 20 years will double. As long as I'm one of them, that's good news. So that's my generation. Anyway, looking quickly at growth. This is just Cornwall. If you only had actually 1% a year of tourism in Cornwall, it would be another 500,000 trips, another 1 million nights. 1% growth a year. Day visitors, because of increased population, increased connectivity, the A30, 2 million extra day visitors on top of the 14 million we get. Now that's good in terms of spend, and it's good in terms of jobs, obviously you have people to do them. But that's 1% a year. So it's very, very small figures. So the one thing we're actually looking at is, so what are the problems that we are facing now? One is summer capacity. The other one, people want a lot more interaction. They want a lot more about experiences rather than just see and do. There's a few, no there isn't. I was going to say there's the odd one or 2 older than me, but I can't see them, so anyway. I can remember Ford Anglers with little triangles on when people went to Tintagel or Luke, Lavelli, and they just drove around looking. And now go to a few more attractions. Now it's more about what you do. Oh, go back. Sorry, it is going to carry on then niggling me. And we're getting a lot of growth about, how you cope with the peak with Airbnb. Nothing against too much about Airbnb, apart from some of the safety issues. But we've got some issues, transport issues. Got to lead to a lot more to do with what we do in the spring. The saddest reflection in the southwest, and probably all areas of Britain, is that the best time of year is often May and June, lighter, and they perform worse. Often May is a worse performing month than October in Cornwall. And that's because the Brits don't think about the spring. Think about summer, think about autumn breaks, they don't think about the spring. And we've got an ageing customer base, and we went through this thing with our board, all private sector, thing called Wise Growth. I'll just leave it with you very quickly, going to go through this because of time. It's about a lovely verb, so it's about the visitors, and they're delighted and respect what the communities treasure and want to protect. So it's about matching visitors to your market. It's about value, not volume, which does mean empty beds, but it does mean you're getting a better price. And it does mean that the only volume can be in non-peak. And actually you're going to have to reduce peak in Cornwall, 50,000 extra residents. It's about environment in the broadest word being improved. I think we've got to be quite ambitious and not just minimise the impact. And actually how can you actually start looking at visitors improving. Very quickly, residents who accept tourism. And in Cornwall, believe it or not, and most people don't, is that actually the vast majority of people know that tourism is a good thing. They just wish they could send the money and not bother coming, but that's the ultimate sustainable tourism. Haven't cracked it yet. Or taxing people in Devonmore would be the other one. Well, I'm on a roll. And businesses that can invest, particularly in people. So it's getting that balance that we're actually after. So there it all comes together. Hang on a minute, where are we? So this is a challenge that I'm giving Cornwall Council is, you will get tourism, it's whether the tourism you want. So you actually got to make sure you get the tourism you want, because you're going to bloody well get it anyway. So let's start looking at some trends and look at the future. There's an interesting one, probably on one of these, deference to age. You can segment the customer very, very ways. There are 2 people in their 80s, or approaching 80, who have slightly dysfunctional families and are very wealthy. One is this gentleman, Ozzy Osbourne. The other one is Prince Charles. He'll never be old, and Prince Charles was never young. By and large, because of the 1960s and 70s, Henley Centre done on this, anybody brought up after the 70s, the deference to age has gone. When I was growing up doing dinghy sailing, when you got to 50, you weren't supposed to be dinghy sailing. By the time you were 65, you were sitting at home, drinking tea, having ginger nuts, and saving up your money to pass on to the next generation. I've warned my kids, you've had it. I've helped them already, and that's your lot, off I go. But let's start looking at some of this. You know, there's somebody who actually doesn't know when to stop driving. And as I said, this thing is, and Henley did it, you actually tend to fix your age, although actually as you get older, my grandfather would say, in the old days you go backwards, at about 25 to 30. That's when you tend to fix what you really are. That's often what you feel inside. That's why I avoid mirrors. And as you get a bit older, you can go backwards then. It's quite fun. When my grandfather was 85, he had the great fun of saying, it's amazing when you get rid of when you're 85 years old and you think you don't know what you're doing. But the only thing that changes people is life stage. You know, from relationships, partners, families, employment gets in the way, kids get in the way, they certainly drain your wallet. Even dogs can affect people. We had the head of Visit Britain and I couldn't believe how many dogs there were in Cornwall in October. And I said the beaches are open. You know, everybody's got a dog, and more than one. Accessibility, and I'm not just talking about real, you know, wheelchairs, and actually the bones. So there's a lot of issues of when you look at him, he's really 25, 30 years of age in his head. So that's what he is. There's anything that's stopping us, well, and the police now, stopping him. So what will it be like? And this is the thing we're actually modelling. But actually, anybody who knows anything about the richest generation we'll ever have, more than likely, they're miserable bastards, because my brother's one of them, is the baby boomers. But you look in 5 years' time, you know, the age span they'll be, and in 10 years' time, 70 to 85, they'll still be the richest generation. They'll still want to carry on doing things. I almost destroyed the electric bike market. My brother at 72, a lot older than me, got an electric bike, and I sympathised with him and said, I knew one of us would get a mobility scooter sooner or later, which is only a joke actually. But actually all his cohort are now getting electric bikes. They gave up the bike 10 years ago, they're now back into it, because they don't want to believe their age, and they will fight their age. So whereas my father's generation and grandfather's generation, it was the thing to do to give in to your age, this generation by and large will fight aging. And I'm going to as well. So it'll actually be something to stop you. So when you start thinking about some of the things later on about product development and everything else, is look at the 30-year-old inside the 70-year-old's body, and how can you help them to do things. And then there's other generations will come through, come back another time about, you know, millennials are millennials and Gen Z. But actually once they start having families, that starts affecting them as well. So it will be interesting how people evolve. They'll always be different from the generation before, but not as different as sometimes people predict. So here we are. I'm going to skip on to that one. So what's the next big thing? This is what we're talking about in Cornwall. And actually our conclusion was no one big thing, lots of little things. Lots of those groups, and I'm still sticking with the baby boomers, the other ones, are very much the other social changes happening, and I'm probably the last generation. You used to get people that were just completely into sailing or one sport or one activity. Increasingly people have a portfolio of them. So there's not one big thing, they're into lots of little things. And equally we've got lots of product, it's called the environment. So it's what you do with what we've got, not pouring concrete or building things necessarily. And some of these are coming out in some of the emerging trends, and these are mega trends in the world. One of which I've always said about the, you know, think of it as age agnostic. You know, I refuse to accept my age. I don't want to feel old. I mean, I went off to a sailing event, I've sailed a solo thing if anybody knows. I thought, oh good, I'm now 60, I qualify for the Grandmaster category. So there were 85 people, there were 25 in Grandmasters, and there were 15 in the over 65s. There was only one person who wasn't between 20 and 50. And yes, we were agnostic, we had a great time sailing, we had a great time partying, we just didn't bounce very well in the morning, that was the only difference. And as I said, The very senior market will be there, but some of those are actually fighting the age. I was at a conference about marketing to the over 50s. They made me chair it because I never stood up and said, normally I can see most people could be my children, but most of you could be my grandchildren, which is really frightening. But the biggest industry that's having problems in this country at the moment is actually funeral planning. People are refusing to accept funeral planning. You know, normally they would get to these people who are baby boomers are not buying funeral plans because they don't know. My father bought one when he was in his 70s. They can't get any traction until some of the new disruptors came in, which was how cheap can you get away with burying somebody. It's called simple cremations. It's from about 200 quid to 600 quid. You're down to one song and only 6 people can come. And their argument is, get rid of me and then use the money to have a party, rather than spending on an expensive funeral. And they've actually cracked into this new generation. They go, I'm going to spend 5,000 quid to make the undertaker rich. So it's changing. As I said, baby boomers we've covered. And Gen X, you know, these are going to be people that unfortunately won't have great pensions. They'll be having bigger mortgages, they'll be in families, they've got to save for their kids' education. A lot more strained, so they're going to be a lot poorer. And then millennials will be growing up. Anyway, I won't go on any further. What I want to do is the other one is this one, is back to basics. And this doesn't mean sackcloth and ashes. It does mean an awful lot about the environment. Because people want to go and actually just experience things that are actually more genuine, more real. So the reason why I said Cornwall's well placed there, but any national park or any outdoor area would be, they want to be out in the environment. Some of the time spent huddled over these things, computers, stuck in offices doing everything else. And some of the other things, you know, the artificial things, there's actually a growing trend to kick back. Linked to that is the conscious consumer, guilt-free tourism, very, very difficult, but it will grow. And that might be a bit of offsetting, but it's actually making sure, and this is, you know, tapped into it, you know, Bell, about the plastics, and now lots of other things about low carbon. You had the announcement last week that Flybe, you know, Virgin Connect, have said they might be dropping some of their short routes because they don't think they're socially responsible to fly when you can go by rail. I think it's because they want to switch the routes to other planes, but that's beside the point. But you get this thing that people are very, very sensitive now and don't want to think they're there. The next one, Bell's covered it, digitally together. That connectivity with Instagram, and we copped it with Pedant Boundaries, it's called, in Finance, about Instagram and the power of that and the power it can drive for good or bad, and connections. You know, I've got a friend of mine, he's seen his grandchildren for the first time when one was 4 and one was 6. And they knew him and ran up and said, Grandad, because he'd always read them a bedtime story through FaceTime, since they were there every day. So that's one element, but they do it. This one, I think, is a real star for this audience. Have you ever come across JOMO? Have you come across FOMO, fear of missing out? Massive. JOMO is the joy of missing out. And this is as far away as digital detox as you can get. So it's not about doing away with it, it's being so occupied you don't look at it. It's being so engaged with something else. And I notice it on the beaches. You can walk around towns and you walk around everybody else and you've got this going on all the time. When you get outside and when people are really engaged in something, they're not picking them up. They're not looking at them, they're looking at the environment, they're being engaged. And it's actually been a very good thing. It's sort of digital detox for those without a willpower. Occupy me somewhere else, enjoy me somewhere else, and that's really it. The other one, and this is the baby boomers, I'm afraid. I always say this to my brother because he's very sensitive, and I've always taken the mickey out of him. Especially when I said, I'm not sure you're my brother, your eldest is always a bit iffy in Cornwall who the father was. Well, he's chairman of the Family History Society. I said, you might have spent 20 years on the wrong family. In Cornish, I say. But what you have got, including increasingly me, is you've got these people getting older. I'll give you some good news and some bad news. Your life expectancy is longer. The number of well days you've had, and this is from Tim Harford, well-known statistician, number of well days you've had will be no different to your parents or your grandparents or your great-grandparents. Every day of extra life we've had over them is medically assisted. From blood pressure pills to... So what you've got is a very ageing population that wants to be young, that has a lovely pension that they shouldn't really have had because they robbed it from other people. They've got a lot of equity in their house, they've got a lot of money, but they're terrified of dropping dead. And therefore, looking after themselves in a good way, electric bikes, going out and walking, social subscribing, while swimming. Best thing you can do for depression is swim in cold water. You know, it's a lot of other things are coming out which can help with this agenda, which absolutely hits this forum, the outside gym. And you know, the big one again is plastic free. And actually, this is around the world, by the way. And the other problem we've got, and the last one, oh no, sorry, two more trends. The last one is I want it now. So coming back to social media, come back to communication. Because of flaming Amazon Prime, there's an old saying, if you want to sell, make it easy to buy. And Amazon Prime like that made it very easy to buy, so people stopped thinking and researching. Because they just want it, they want it now. So if we're going to get all these experiences and all these wonderful activities, you've got to be able to find out about it quickly. Because as they come up, the attention spans of some of the generations. I mean, I would love to do an experiment in this country. Well, you're probably going to guess where I'm coming from. Who can tell me that the 29th of June 2007, probably, because I did have one person who corrected me on this one, probably that day has changed your life, but you can't remember what happened. 12 years ago. The first smartphone. Facebook wasn't very big, it was all on laptops. Instagram didn't exist. Twitter was just a little tweet. Only 12 years. Now, can you imagine the younger generation if you took away the internet and the smartphone? They wouldn't be able to go anywhere. So that sort of instant thing of what do we do tomorrow, what do we do, how do we do it, it's very just in time. So actually, in terms of influencing people, it's not that I want it now, it's this is what you can do now. So we're working on the website with an online booking agent about experiences, and then also doing social media to tie into the weather. And we know that most people in Cornwall stay for 6-7 days. So if you know the weather's going to be bad, how do you influence people and tell them what to do? The other one, partly through divorce rates, partly through those who don't look after themselves, is lone living. They might be living alone, but doesn't mean they want to be on their own. And therefore, walking groups, Nordic walking, activities that bring people together are equally going to be a very big trend, because that's the way it's sort of going. So there's a lot of subtle changes, but I sort of want to really sort of sum up in the fact of some of these trends. Just look around and you'll see people in your own families and communities that reflect on these people, and they carry on reflecting. And as I said, remember that thing about the person inside, not what they look like and what they want to do. And I think there's another generation, particularly around the health issue, and I think this is right across the issue, which is starting to now question that maybe there's a better way than medical intervention to help you live longer. And actually that's going to be a trend of, you know, how long can you go before they have to start giving you pills. It's very, very sad, because occasionally people take me around hotels to show them. That's not the sad bit. I always hate it when they take me in people's rooms when the people are out. It always feels as though I'm being a bit yucky, you know. But if you went into Torquay, or Newquay, or then Turkey and tinsel are on, it's quite scary. It's like a pharmaceutical shelf in the bathrooms. Normally next to a bottle of gin and a bottle of sherry, but you know, the amount of pharmaceuticals that people actually are having to take. And I think personally that's why, you know, that idea of social subscribing, and it's, you know, as my doctor said to me on last Friday, when I actually said you're overweight, I said I'm under height. She gave me my medical thing and she said, you know, your problem is lifestyle. Isn't that refreshing to be told that? Not, oh, we can deal with that. Sort out your lifestyle and you'll be fine. So I think that sort of whole area is coming together, and therefore the outside environment, the outside activities, the different ways of learning. You know, soon with these things, you know, Google are already working on it. You will be able to look at that plant or that creature and know what it is and learn a bit more about it. But equally, just to be active and engaged mentally as well as physically will be a very strong driver. For the southwestern national parks generally, the other thing about an ageing population is your world gets smaller. As you get older, you don't want to quite travel so far. First it stops from London, you know. So there's going to be an ageing population. Doesn't mean I'm ignoring the other ones, because actually it's equally possible that everything you develop to meet the baby boomer generation by and large will fit other ones to differing degrees, maybe more technology based, but it's a very, very strong trend. So it's, as I said, going back to when we're about 2/3, 3/4 of the way through this exercise, and the council kept saying to me, but you know, coming back to the big thing, what's the next big thing we need to do? And I went, it's about developing events and experiences to meet some of these issues. It's about engaging with people. It's not about another Eden or another Tate or another something else. It can be taking people in the countryside to teach them to paint. It can be teaching them to do things in a fun and enjoyable way, but not, you don't need concrete or anything else. You just need to use what God has given us in the countryside and in the coastline. Because I'll give you one last thought. It always struck me funny from the guy who was saying about what effect the countryside has. I presume most people have. Who walks on the coastal path? Next time you walk along the coastal path and you see people sitting down looking out to sea, which most of the time is just blue water, isn't it? Just for the horizon, unless you're around a port. The funny thing is, the better view is inland. There's more things going on behind their backs than there is in front of them. But the difference is, there's something that happens cerebrally in your brain about looking at infinity in the horizon. And it's the same as if you're on the top of a big hill or a mountain. Because actually it's quite weird that they're looking the wrong way, except we all do it. So there's a lot of things in the environment that can actually help people, whilst at the same time making lots of money for tourist boards and tourism industry. So thank you very much.